In this instance, what the allegation was and what the reported crime was very simply that the individual threatened to do very isolated, very specific harm to the reporting party, and it is simply a Class B misdemeanor. Again, it's not this overarching thing that we think of when you hear the word terrorist or terroristic. It's perhaps outdated in the Texas Penal Code, but it remains on the books, and that's what it's titled. So hopefully we can clear that aspect of it up. The officers took that report. When they're interacting with the suspect out in town, they're faced with a circumstance of whether or not to search this vehicle. They asked for consent, and that was refused. They entertained whether or not they had enough to search it without that consent, and they did not. There was not enough probable cause to search it on its own, nor to get a warrant for the vehicle. They thought there might be perhaps even drugs in the vehicle. They looked into whether or not a drug dog was available to come and sniff the vehicle, and there was not one available. They looked at a few avenues. Ultimately, it would have been unconstitutional for the officers to search the vehicle. There was no arrestable charge. There was nothing to hold the individual on at that time, so they released him. I want to be very, very clear on that. There's no criticism to be had of the officers at that time. They wrote their report and went on to the next calls. Later that day, and these are some things we can't get into at this time. Later that day, there were some other reports made through the Texas Tech Police Department, and there were reports made through some of the mechanisms that they have, as well as with the individual's family, as the day passed on October the 9th, on Monday. The Texas Tech Police Department responded to the check welfare call that evening. Officer East and other officers arrested the individual and had him at the Texas Tech Police Department. There's some confusion over whether there was an interrogation going on or anything like that. That's not the case. He was being processed to be booked into the jail. And during that time, Officer East was shot and killed inside the Texas Tech Police Department. We received that call of shots fired within 2 minutes of it occurring. We got that call at I believe 7:46 p.m. We began responding units to the campus and had officers on the campus within 3 minutes at 7:49 p.m. And this is where I want to really begin to talk about how we address these kinds of circumstances. What I saw when I got to the campus is an effort to ensure that the students and the faculty of Texas Tech University were safe. There's a lot of speculation, a lot of things that have circulated across social media, through comments to media websites, and concerns that have been called in from parents, called in from members of the Lubbock community over whether or not the Texas Tech campus is safe. And I want to say emphatically that it is, that we had a remarkable response. The Texas Tech Police Department handles the day-to-day law enforcement operations on Texas Tech campus. Every agency, no matter its size, can reach a certain capacity, a certain limitation. And at that point, they call in for resources from other agencies. We've done that ourselves. We don't have an aircraft. We often rely on the aircraft support from the Department of Public Safety. You saw in Houston where they were overwhelmed after the Hurricane Harvey events. They called for resources from around the state. It's exactly what's supposed to happen. There, I think, is some misinformation that we're supplanting Texas Tech's operations. That's not the case. We're there to support them, and we do that quite often, as they do us, in many, many circumstances. So when we began to respond to the campus, I want to make very clear that we were able to swarm officers from the Lubbock Police Department, the Lubbock County Sheriff's Office, the Department of Public Safety, the Texas Rangers, the FBI, I believe it was an ATF agent. Law enforcement officers from all over this region began to diverge onto the Texas Tech campus and lock that area down to cast a net from under which the suspect could not escape and could do no further harm. I'll confirm, in fact, that the suspect did try to make it back to his dorm room and was unable to get into his dorm room, was unable to get very far into the dorm. He immediately saw that there was law enforcement there and had to leave again. He was unable to get to his vehicle. Law enforcement officers had the vehicle. We were on top of the vehicle. He was first sighted at 9:08 p.m. and was taken into custody by a Texas Tech police officer at 9:26 p.m. That's a remarkable thing. From our standpoint, and from what I could see from what was the command post, where I stood with the sheriff, with Major Snyder with the Texas Rangers, and with the chief of police for the Texas Tech Police Department working hand in hand, that was remarkable. And everyone in that response did an outstanding job to keep the students and the faculty of the Texas Tech University campus safe. We were able to contain that situation so that he could not get out into the city, could not go mobile. I'm very proud of that response. Excuse me. From that point, Chief Boniff with the Texas Tech Police Department requested that we pick up the investigation of the homicide of Officer East. And so just as we would do with one of our own officers or any other homicide, we did a homicide call-out. And so Lubbock police detectives responded, began to process that scene, aided by members of the Texas Rangers, the Texas Department of Public Safety's laboratory services, also with members of the Lubbock County Sheriff's Office. We also had help from the local FBI office.